we've got a patch, a big patch, in fact, a couple balance changes for standard that are going to have moderate impacts on the meta, but certainly I think some significant impacts on fun levels, and also a giant patch for Battlegrounds, Elementals, and a ton of elemental heroes being added to Battlegrounds. All of this supposedly hitting tomorrow, so coming very, very soon. So first up here, we're gonna take a pretty in-depth look at these nerfs, and then we're gonna run through the Battlegrounds changes really quickly. I'm gonna follow up with a future video discussing the Battlegrounds cards in more detail. But for now, Guardian Animals up first, going from 7 mana to 8 mana. And this one is certainly going to be meta impactful. Guardian Druid is a pretty high tier 2 deck most days when you look. And we've all had Guardian Animals come down really quickly, dump a ton of stats on board, cleave our stuff to death, draw the Druid a billion cards, so on and so forth. And it's really been one of my go-to cards for like the most unfun things in Scholomance Academy, of which there's really only been a couple. I mostly love Scholomance Academy cards and designs, and I think the meta has been quite balanced across multiple classes. A couple are left out perhaps, but Guardian Animals is really one of the big sticking points for me so far. It's just too consistent for Druids to either Overgrowth or Lightning Bloom into this much earlier than a true 7 mana turn, often playing it on turn 5, 4, even sometimes turn 1 is possible for Guardian Animals. And by bumping it to 8 mana, that is going to significantly impact how quickly this happens. Most naturally is the curve from Overgrowth into Guardian Animals is now broken because you need an additional mana requiring something like that Innervate or Lightning Bloom to get it out on that given turn. That's a resource they have to commit to make that happen. More often you just will see it come down one turn later than you expect, pretty much always, because they're usually playing it as quickly as humanly possible based on their hand state anyway. So just delay everything by one turn, and what that does is give decks a lot more time to establish their own counter boards, to get some taunts in the way, to just kill the Druid in the meantime with lots of onboard pressure. So this definitely will have a major impact on how quickly Druid can start to stabilize and can start to counter pressure, which is what the deck's all about, is like swinging and then just dominating the game after that big swing turn. By delaying that for a moment or two, they're going to lose a lot more games. So I think this does significantly hurt what Guardian Druid can do. Does it totally kill the deck? Probably not. I think, honestly, if you look at Guardian Animals still at 8 mana, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get 10 mana worth of stuff. I'm giving it Rush. It's still a solid card in a weird way. It's just more demanding for Druid to keep up and a little bit harder for them to stay alive in many cases. We might see the deck list shift their curve downward a little bit to make sure they're finding things to do in the meantime, but still relying on Guardian Animals for swing turns and maybe Mount Sellers, Scalefoss, Ysera, etc. Just having to reshape the deck a little to keep it alive. So I think this is a great change because, namely, it was a unfun card to play against in most cases, and delaying that unfun turn by a little bit is going to make it more enjoyable. It's still probably going to be unfun in some cases, but both of these nerfs seem to be addressing cards that are annoying to play against almost as much as they're addressing cards that are really powerful to play against, which I know some of you out there hate. Some of you think cards should only be based strictly on win rate. I personally think that argument is silly because it's a video game. The whole point is to have fun. People are supposed to enjoy the video game. There's not some objective mathematical goal to be achieved when balancing the meta. The point to balancing a meta is to make sure everybody's enjoying the game as much as possible. I think changes like this help achieve that and still probably address a card that could be annoying for a while from a power level standpoint too. So our next change here is to Tortollan Pilgrim. Now we'll no longer discover a copy of a spell in your deck. It will discover the spell itself, thereby using the spell from your deck when it goes off. Now what this means is for decks like Turtle Mage that were utilizing pseudo-infinite potions of illusion to copy the Tortollan Pilgrims and just chaining off Frost Novas and burst damage, whatever it is, over and over again to lock down the game state and use that as their win condition, will no longer be able to do that infinitely because they will use their Potion of Illusions rapidly after 2 cycles as opposed to 25 cycles or 100 cycles or whatever it might be, which means that this does effectively kill Turtle Mage. I certainly don't think 2 cycles is enough to make this deck worth it by any means. So Turtle Mage is dead. And I think that's a good change for the game, honestly. I'm sure there are people out there who love playing Turtle Mage. it's tough when you lose a deck you love. I get it. I'm sympathetic to you in some ways, but frankly, your deck was ruining a lot of people's Hearthstone because Turtle Mage is really, really frustrating to play against. Not being able to interact, knowing you essentially have no chance to win the game once it gets to that state. If your deck's not built specifically to be high pressure or aggro enough to race them down, then you just often cannot win unless they mess something up. That is not a good Hearthstone experience. So I thought Turtle Mage was pretty bad for the game. This was really the only other major unfun point left in the Scholomance Academy meta, and to see it resolved is another good change as far as I'm concerned. I wish there was some like subtle way to do this without completely killing the deck. Like, I don't know, maybe you could put the Tortolin to like 9 mana or something to try to limit that first turn, but I don't know if that would have been enough. I think this just really solves this problem and maybe any future problems that could exist as well with Potion of Illusion shenanigans. So, you know, you might say, why not nerf Potion of Illusion? Again, I don't know if you can. I think you have to go back to the Tortolin to solve the problem because Potion just does something so specific, and Tortolin's going to be able to exploit that unless you just completely change how Potion of Illusion works. So this does, to me, look like the right change. It's ultimately, I think, a good change. Sure, there will be some side effects for people out there who love Turtle Mage. I'm sorry. But still, at the end of the day, I think those sacrifices have to be worth it because this was something that probably drove a lot of people away from Hearthstone in its short reign. And yet again, not a deck with an absurdly high power level. I mean, certainly good if you're a skilled player at high ranks. For most of the population, you probably didn't even realize Turtle Mage was a good deck at all because, you know, lower skilled players aren't going to play this one quite as well. It does take a fair bit of practice and expertise to get some of the finer details right before you get to your, you know, easy face roll combo stuff. So, you know, you may not think it needs it from a win rate standpoint. Again, I think this one's just a quality of life, a fun measurement change to make sure Hearthstone remains an enjoyable game for as many people as it can. So that's it for our standard format nerfs here. Ultimately, I think good ones. And what that means is we're going to head over to the Battlegrounds Changes, just run through these real quickly. And again, I'll be doing those in a little bit more detail later. All right, so here we go with the new Battleground stuff here live on the patch notes, including new heroes like Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, who has a passive effect. After you kill 20 enemies, get Sulfurous. And then Sulfurous, which you can read here, it reads, at the end of your turn, give your left and rightmost minions +4/+4. So some nice inevitable scaling here based on positioning, which is cool because you often want like a big taunt minion. Maybe you can give a divine shield on the right, maybe a big cleave minion on the left, and then they're just scaling like crazy. So Ragnaros seems awesome. I don't know exactly how hard it's going to be to kill 20 enemy minions, but that feels like that's going to happen fairly naturally. You know, within the first 5-6 turns of the game, I would expect, as long as you're not too weak. So that could be an awesome hero power. Next up is Chinvala with Avalanche. After you play 3 elementals, reduce the cost of upgrading Bob's Tavern by 2. So an elemental synergy card, and we haven't seen elementals yet, but I think based on what I know, you're going to be playing a lot of elementals. Now that said, this is still one of those like forced tribe or minion type heroes, which always struggle just a little bit. Like, yeah, you can do some stuff with Patches and Jiraxis, but in my experience, they have lower win rates, and often if you don't hit the elementals you need, you're just feeling pretty terrible, like you have a weak hero. That said, the reward here is worth a couple gold and could really help you accelerate nicely. So if elementals have good late game scaling, perhaps it makes up for the forced nature of the hero power. We've also got Rakanishu here with Tavern Lightning, a 2 gold hero power. Give a random friendly minion stats equal to your Tavern tier. So if you're Tavern tier 2, playing this on 5 gold, for instance, it's a pretty nice +2/+2 buff. And then later in the game, it's a +5/+5 buff, or +6/+6 buff, you know, as you scale into the late game. Which isn't too bad, actually, for 2 gold. You know, often we'll cycle minions with Bran for 3 gold or 2 net gold, right, to get a buff off Bran. This is kind of like having a Bran buff in many cases, a 1 cycle Bran buff just attached to your hero, which is nice. I don't know how scalable it's going to be, and I don't know how efficient it's going to feel in the mid game, but I could still see some potential off Tavern Lightning, particularly on a few key turns early. There's also Alec here, the Windlord here, swatting insects. Start a combat, give your leftmost minion Wind Fury, Divine Shield, and Taunt. That's pretty crazy with a cleave minion, because if you get a big cleave, giving it Wind Fury and Divine Shield means it's very reliably going to be able to take 2 straight attacks. This seems kind of insane as long as you have a cleave minion, maybe like a nice poisonous minion you could put in there too. You don't need it to have Divine Shield at a base level if you've got this hero power. So just any random Murloc might be able to go 2 for 2 if your opponent's not running a Divine Shield taunt. This seems like it could be really crazy strong under the right builds. But again, it does kind of force you down a path to make it work well. I mean, I guess any giant big statted minion giving a Divine Shield is kind of good. So I imagine this has a fair bit of flexibility as long as you're scaling any big minion, that Gold Grubber, Salty Looter, whatever it is. Something giant giving Divine Shield is awesome and worth a lot. So I like swatting insects quite a bit. As always, you know, these are going to be hidden behind the Tavern Pass. I'm not a big fan of that, but, you know, if you want to play them now, you can spend some money or you can wait. Now, that said, we've got some elementals here. I'm not going to go through each of these in great detail because, as I mentioned, I am going to do a full review for all of these cards later today. Stay tuned, but I did just want to get them all on screen for you to see. We've got some pretty crazy cycling cards here, like Elemental, that's going to be adding extra elementals into your hand, and that's going to play in big. Playing lots of elementals, I think, is going to drive this archetype. We've got the Refreshing Anomaly. Refreshes going to be cheaper, so a great way to save some gold while cycling an elemental. Party Elemental as a scaling unit early. Think cards like Pack Leader just in a different direction. For this one, giving another friendly elemental +1/+1, which is pretty cool. The Molten Rock also gaining stats anytime you play an elemental, so more value off cycling through your elementals, and this could be a pretty big high health body before too long. If you can buff its attack to counter with that health, that's nice. To combine with that health, you got Stasis Elemental, which adds an elemental to Bob's Tavern and freezes it, so this is a good card to cycle and keep moving through more elementals. The Arcane Assistant is just straight up going to give your other elementals +1/+1, so a nice wide board buff for tier 3. Usually we see these tier 3 buffs doing things like buffing a singular minion in the mid game. This one's buffing all your elementals, which can go a long way. Kind of like a spawn of N'Zoth that you're just burning through quickly. You got Crackling Cyclone here, Divine Shield and Wind Fury. So this would be a good buff target in many cases, making sure that you get a lot of stats on this guy. Could snipe a couple things early in the game if you put it on that left side, which is cool. It also has Mega Wind Fury in gold, which is really, really nice because it's not going to be too hard to triple this out as a tier 3 minion. You got Whirlwind Tempest, an actual real card from Hearthstone we know. It gives all Wind Fury minions Mega Wind Fury. Seems like it has some opportunity. I mean, it's hard to get minions that survive 4 attacks, so I don't know how impactful that's going to be, but you could certainly envision some scenarios where that pans out nicely. It's kind of in a pinch thing you finish your build on or whatever. We got the Wildfire Elemental. After this attacks and kills a minion, deal excess damage to a random adjacent minion. So it's kind of like a mini cleave. Instead of dealing to both adjacent minions, it's only dealing it to one, and it's only excess damage. So at first glance, this looks a little weaker than cards like Cave Hydra, but it has a higher base stat line, which is nice. And given how much elementals seem like they're going to be able to scale across the board, it might be nice anyway, just because it's potentially going to deal a ton of excess damage if you can get it to be a big stat total. That said, it also does both adjacent minions and golden. So if you do triple this out, which isn't crazy for tier 4 minions, then you will get the kind of full cleave effect that you're expecting. But again, it is only excess damage, so that's, you know, a little bit of a downside we don't see on these other ones, but it starts at a higher base stat line. We've also got the Deadly Spore, which is not an elemental minion, but it is here to counter, I think, the high health totals possible for elementals. Anytime we don't have like Murlocs in a lobby, you might need things like Deadly Spore to help you answer some of these crazy high stat totals it seems like they're going to achieve. So that's a pretty cool little tech. You also got Major Domo Executus, a tier 4 minion. At the end of your turn, give your leftmost minion +1/+1 for each elemental you played this turn. So some more cool positioning-based options. Make sure you get that cool thing in your left side, and Major Domo might be able to scale it up, you know, +5/+5, +10/+10 potentially, but it is only hitting 1 minion at a time, so it doesn't have some of the crazy scaling possibilities like Nomi Kitchen Nightmare, for instance, which reads, after you play an elemental, elementals in Bob's Tavern have +1/+1 for the rest of the game. So for this one, your elementals in the shop are going to scale, and I have confirmed this is only for you. You're not scaling all elementals for everybody. It's only minions in your shop that get the benefit. But that means if you play 5 elementals with Nomi on board, all the elementals you buy are going to have +5/+5. And then the turn after that, you play 5 more. They're all going to have +10/+10. So it's kind of crazy if you're cycling through a lot of elementals. You might be able to replace stuff on your board really easily. to help it scale even better, you might be able to just finish on stronger minions if you're cycling through that last spot on your board. All in all, this is kind of nuts, I think. I'm really, really excited to try this card. We also have Little Rag. After you play an elemental, give a friendly minion stats equal to the elemental's tavern tier. That's also crazy on board scaling. So if you're tier 5 playing with Little Rag, anytime you cycle into an elemental, some other elemental is going to get +5/+5. And it could be Little Rag itself too. It doesn't say other friendly minion. So, I mean, that's just, you know, +5/+5 every time you cycle into a cheap elemental, like with this elemental early. That sounds crazy to me. You got the Tavern Tempest, add another random elemental to your hand. Might sound expensive at tier 5, but consider how valuable having elementals to play are. So mine, this gets you 2 for 1, which is really nice. So in a pinch, this could be awesome. Lieutenant Gar, tier 6 unit, taunt after you play an elemental, gain +1 health for each elemental that you have. So another giant way to gain a ton of life. This continues to scale, remember. So if you have, 7 elementals on board, each time you, or I guess you'll probably have 6 when you're playing one. I don't know if it counts the new one or not, but 6 or 7 elementals on board, this is going to gain that +6 every time you play an elemental. So this is like going to be bigger than an Isle and Battle Masters. It takes a little longer to get going because it's not a battle cry, but once it gets going, it's going to be ginormous. And then finally, the Gentle Genie, a 6/8 taunt, death rattle, summon another random elemental, and add a copy of it to your hand. So every time this dies, you're getting an elemental in hand, which, as we know, is pretty nice. I think this one's a little weak in consideration of other things, but remember, if you're just cycling into final board spots, this could be an amazing thing to land on because it's going to be scaled a ton off of Nomi, Kitchen Nightmare, etc. So there are also, of course, some Battlegrounds updates. The rating system, we heard about this essentially. You're going to start at 0 now instead of 4,000. Everybody's getting reset. You're going to get up to 300 per win now as you scale back towards your sort of internal hidden rating, it sounds like. You'll never go below 0. You can't lose rating until you get above 2,000. So 2,000 is the new floor. And then there will also be floors every 500 rating up to 6,000, which will end as the highest rating floor. And then below 6,500, everybody's going to get a small bonus. That's what I mentioned, which will make their climb a little faster to their expected spot, or up to 6,500. In fact, even it sounds like. And that means there's, a chance to get to 6,000, kind of like the new Legend or Diamond 5, perhaps, although it seems a little low, but we don't know if the scaling is the same or not. We'll have to see where that goes. There's a Dev Insights blog. You can read more on that. We already talked about these balance changes. There's dual class arena coming, some bug fixes for Micro Mummy, etc., some tavern brawls, so on and so forth. Really, the nerfs and the Battlegrounds updates are the things I care most about. So, again, I'll dive into these minions a little bit more, actually even reviewing them, I think, on how impactful they're going to be, and talking in great detail. That said, lots of cool stuff coming. We're going to be playing all of this, of course, lots of Battlegrounds, and a little bit of standard changes to see how the meta shakes up. That said, good luck out there in 18.4. Believe this is slated to hit tomorrow. And that said, thanks much as always for watching. Yeah, starting September 29th. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks as much for watching, and until next time, game on.